Well, Michael Fabricant is the Conservative MP for Lichfield. Good morning.
Borada, good morning.
I wonder how concerned you are about the profile the Prime Minister is giving this ahead of the general election. You know, we know how difficult this has been to try to make any headway from successive Conservative administrations. Are you nervous about it?
I am nervous, yes, because at the end of the day, it's not going to be rhetoric that counts. We hear that from all politicians. It's going to be delivery. And this is a tough one. I think it's quite interesting, actually. I was looking up some statistics when I knew I was going to be doing this interview. Apparently, as you know, 46,000 people came across the channel in the last year. Actually, 1.1 million people came legally to the United Kingdom in the last 12 months. So, you know, it puts it into a bit of perspective. And I want to be a bit fair as well to the French, because apparently some 35,000 people were prevented by the French from actually getting across the channel. So I don't like it particularly when people try and make out that the French are doing nothing. But of course, we would like them to do a little bit more too. And that's why the money has been given to them. Because don't forget, France is in recession at the moment, as is Germany. We've just squeaked out of it. So actually, providing they can actually keep more people safely on their shores, the money's probably worth it, because we don't actually know how many people have died in the channel.
And I guess the question here is credibility, isn't it, from the Conservatives? As I mentioned earlier, really from David Cameron onwards in recent years, no one's really been able to make significant headway on this in trying to deal with it. And you know, why should we believe Rishi Sunak when previous Conservative Prime Ministers have failed?
Well, Nick, I'm not going to argue with you. Nick, you're absolutely right. But as I said earlier, it'll be the delivery that counts. Now, Rishi Sunak thinks that he can deliver. He also said, by the way, that no one single measure is going to tackle this. I mean, I do find it extraordinary and even slightly flattering, actually, that people do want to come to the United Kingdom. The Dublin, I think it's called the Dublin Protocol on International Refugees, is that the first safe country that refugees get to should be the one in which they stay. And of course, we know that they come across Germany, through Switzerland, Belgium, into France, all safe countries with the sole objective of getting to the United Kingdom. But to answer your question, why should we believe him? Look, the only way we will believe him is when it happens. There's got to be delivery. And one thing that Rishi Sunak knows is that.
Well, look, OK, so we've established you're open-minded on this, Michael, in terms of whether it'll work or not. You know, you talk about, you're flattered that people are coming to the UK. They're coming because they're desperate.
But if they're desperate, why don't they stay in France? Why don't they stay in Germany? Why don't they stay in Switzerland, where they get to first? That's the question I'm asking.
A lot of them have connections with the UK, and we're talking about desperate people in terrible circumstances. I just wonder where do you sit?
Some of them are not desperate, actually, are they? Because they're paying £5,000 to people smugglers. Many of them will be desperate. Many of them are not desperate. Many of them are economic migrants. There's nothing wrong with that, but Nikki, to characterise them all as being desperate, weak people who move through safe countries like France, like Germany, like Switzerland, like Italy. No, that doesn't really make sense, does it?
It's a mix, and economic migration, I'm a product of it myself, like so many of us are, is part of what goes on in the world. It's just, I just wonder, in terms of the humanity of it, Michael, in terms of the ethical question, you know, one of the central criticisms of the UK Conservative government's approach on this is that there's no safe routes for people with legitimate claims to come and claim asylum. So they're forced into the arms of.
Who says that?
There are limited safe routes.
That is not true. As
into the UK.
No, Nick, you really have fallen for the propaganda. First of all, the United Nations, UNHCR, our British embassies, as I said right at the beginning of this interview, in the last 12 months, 1.1 million people legally came to the United Kingdom. Of course there are safe routes. They wouldn't have got here legally If there weren't, that is an absolute fabrication.
No,
and I'm surprised that you naively believe it.
Limited countries, Ukraine, Syria, there are limited countries. Look,
Somalia,
okay. Well, look,
where also many boat people come from. They're just jumping ahead of the queue. And as I said, 1.1 million people came here legally. How did they do that if there were no safe routes?
Just finally, let's deal with the elephant.
Nikki, go on, tell me.
Well,
if there are no safe routes, you asserted that. How come 1.1 million people came here legally?
Well, it's a mix, isn't it? Like you said, it's a mix of economic migration and all of the mix that comes into
so
it.
There are safe routes for 1.1 million people.
Look, let's move into the elephant in the room on this, actually, because we can talk as much as we like about safe routes and all the rest of it. But a lot of these policies could just get caught up in the courts and the legality of it.
That's right, yes.
And say what you like about Labour's approach, but it is pretty pragmatic, and that effectively they're going to deal with the system that's in place currently.
How?
They're saying they're going to increase patrols, better relations with France. Now,
well,
okay,
didn't you? Well,
all I'm
what
saying
do you
is,
think that Rishi Sunak's visit to France was all about? It was all about better relations.
Exactly the point I put to Joe Stevens. I just want to ask you about, you must have concerns about whether actually all of the approach just gets snarled up in the courts and how realistic it is.
No, that is a fair point. It's a fair point, actually, that I put to Suella Braverman, the Home Secretary, because I too am concerned about that very point. Interestingly, the change in the law will mean that most of the times that people have been held back into the UK because of court action is because the appeals process has allowed them to stay in the UK. What will happen this time is people will be moved from the UK to another safe haven. Rwanda is one place. There are other places in mind too, and they'll make their appeal from there. The whole object is it's just one method to try and deter people from using the unsafe route, which are the people smugglers' route. As far as Labour Party policy is concerned, as far as I can see, is have an open border.
Right, OK. We'll have to leave it there. Right, Michael Fabricant, thank you for your time this morning. Good to talk to you.